So while I was rummaging around my fridge and my pantry, I wanted to show you, and my freezer, I wanted to show you what I found and some of the things that I wanted to use up. So I found some ham. This was cooked ham that I'd done in the oven a few nights ago when I was dealing with a sick horse. I didn't video any of that because I was super busy and I was by myself, so I had a lot going on. But this is leftovers from that night, and I would like to use it up. I also have some hamburger that I had cooked up, and I didn't need all of it for the supper I was making last night because it was a late dinner, but I didn't need all of it, so I reserved some of it to cook with today. So I'm going to use that today. I had found, rummaging in my pantry, I found some zucchini that I had freeze dried. I actually just took my regular peeler. Which one was it? This guy here. I had peeled it with my regular peeler into like strips and then just put it into my freeze dryer to make like a zucchini noodle. I will probably use a regular noodle too because I found a package of broken ones in the cupboard that I'd like to use up, but I wanted to use these and see how I could use these today. I have a jar of pasta or pizza sauce that I had made from tomatoes and garlic and onions that I had grown this past season in 2021. I freeze dried these in another video. This is some of the cauliflower that we had found when I rummaged through. I freeze dried this with you guys a week ago or so. So I want to use this up today and make a cauliflower crust. I found some psyllium on the shelf. This was actually, I bought a great big bulk bag of it because I had a horse that had needed some digestive aids. So I had bought a big bulk bag of psyllium. It was human grade. So I split it with my horse. I just took a really small fraction of it and I found it finally. A few months ago I found it. So I put it on my pantry shelf and I just decided today is the day I'm going to use it in a recipe. And then in my freezer, I found some flaxseed meal that I would like to use up as well. And then this was in my freezer. Also, this is cheese. I had bought bulk cheese and I wanted to use some of this up today too. For these recipes with like the zucchini and for what I would normally do, because I used to do gluten-free and a lot of dairy-free. So what I would usually do is I would reserve my the pulp from cashew milk to make a cheese, but I'm not doing that today. But if that's something that interests you of what you might be interested in doing, that's an option. If you're wanting to do something like what I'm doing and making it dairy-free, that's an option for you. But today I'm just going to use cheese because I have it to use up in my freezer. Okay, so my plan, I think, is going to be making a lasagna, and I also want to make a cauliflower crust pizza. So just little ones for lunch size. Even if we don't eat them all today, then I can have them in the fridge for lunches for the week. I'm going to start with making the cauliflower crust pizza. So in this bowl, I'm adding in the contents of the cauliflower that we had freeze-dried in a previous video. I will link that video below if you wanted to see me do that. But instead of using cauliflower rice, I'm just using freeze-dried cauliflower. This cauliflower I grew in my garden. It was past its prime when I picked it, and I should have used it a long time ago, but I just wanted to use it for this experiment. It doesn't look really pretty because it had a lot of moisture on it when I harvested it out of the garden, and it was really ripe, just about ready to bolt. So I really didn't want to waste it when I harvested it, and this is how I'm using it up. In this recipe is using it in place of cauliflower rice that you would typically use to make cauliflower pizza. So I'm just crumbling it up. Nothing really fancy here, just crumbling it up into bits and pieces like would be equivalent to cauliflower rice. And then what I will do is I will just add a little bit more moisture when I'm combining everything so that it can reconstitute. to, instead of using like when you use cauliflower rice, you're trying to extract the moisture. This is just kind of opposite where you're literally adding moisture. So I needed an egg for this and I didn't have any fresh eggs. So I went to the pantry and I grabbed my freeze-dried free-range eggs from my hens that I preserved this summer. So I used 2 tablespoons of water to 2.5, or 2 tablespoons of egg to 2.5 tablespoons of water. And here I'm just kind of breaking it up because it was in chunks and I wanted it to reconstitute a little bit quicker. So I was just speeding up the process by crumbling it up. So I just added regular water, or just room temperature water, and I let it reconstitute that way, give it a mix, and then set it to the side so it had time to absorb. It didn't take very long, a couple minutes, and it was ready to use. Okay, back to the cauliflower rice. Into this rice, I'm going to add my other ingredients before I add the wet. So I'm going to add some psyllium, about 1 tablespoon of psyllium, however you say it. I'm probably saying it wrong. I'm sorry. But about 1 tablespoon is what I added to this dry. Next, I'm going to add about 1/2 tablespoon of the flaxseed, just because I didn't want it like really, because flaxseed does have a texture and a flavor, and I didn't really want it to overpower, so I added about 1/2 tablespoon, so it had some nice texture and just a little bit of flavor. Next, I added about 1 teaspoon of granulated garlic, 1 teaspoon of granulated onion, I don't know how much, 1/8 of a teaspoon of basil, however you say it, from my garden that I had dried. And this is some oregano, and I just kind of crushed it up and gave it a little bit of freshening up by rubbing it together and grinding it a little bit. This is the egg again, and it looks like it's ready to use. It's all reconstituted, so I just gave it a little brisk whisk and dumped it on in. It was, the average consistency. It's really interesting how eggs, when you freeze dry them and reconstitute them, they are so much alike their original form. I did add a splash more water because it just wasn't quite as hydrated as I would have liked it. And then I just added in some cheese, some mozzarella. I'd say approximately 1/2 cup, maybe not even quite that much. Just, it looks like lots from the angle, but it was approximately about 1/2 cup of cheese, shredded cheese. Just gave that a really good stir. I think I would have let it sit for a few minutes before I went on to the next step of pressing it into the pan. I think just to kind of help it hydrate everything thoroughly, but it worked okay. I didn't have much issues with it. I did add a little bit of olive oil. I had forgotten to add that before. I just did like a tiny little drop, a couple little drops of olive oil. I wasn't sure how it would, how it would crisp up. I wanted it kind of crispy, and so I thought it would just help a little bit. I preheated the oven to about 400 degrees, and I grabbed my big old cast iron pan. I thought the easiest way to cook this up would be to put it into some cast iron, get it good and like a good bake on it before I put the toppings. So that's what I did. I just tossed the mixture right on into the cast iron pan, and then I just started to shape it. This has always been the easiest way for me to deal with any type of gluten-free cooking or any type of cauliflower-based recipes. I just find that to be the easiest method working with these ingredients. So once this was patted out, I threw this into the oven at 400 degrees for, basically until it had a nice golden crust on it. I don't know how long exactly. So while that was baking, I grabbed the bigger casserole dish because I realized I'm probably going to need a little bit more of a larger casserole for this if I'm going to be making it for dinner. So I just grabbed my little square casserole dish, and I took the pizza sauce that I was planning to use for the cauliflower crust pizza, and I decided to use that instead of actual pasta sauce to make this lasagna, because essentially it has a lot of the same flavors. And if I find that if you're going to make something, you don't want to make it a mimic. You don't want to when you're using gluten-free ingredients or like copycat ingredients, it's best not to make something that it's not. Making this appear to be something that it's not. Try to just like enhance what you're creating and be creative with it instead of like trying to fool your mind, because you'll be disappointed. I always just try to make something completely its own and don't try to convince myself that it's something else. And I always find that as long as I have that strategy when it comes to baking and cooking, that it usually turns out way better than trying to trick your mind. So I just took some ready bake lasagna noodles and I laid them on top of a little bit of the pasta or the sauce, the tomato sauce that I had thrown down on the bottom of the dish. These were the oven ready lasagna noodles. I found like a part package in the cupboard that I didn't even know were there. And I just wanted to use them up. I would have used, if they would have been like the rice noodles or whatever, I would have used those instead, and I wouldn't have cooked them either. I would have just thrown them in. They would have been fine. So I just added a little bit more sauce on top of those noodles. I realized I wanted to add cottage cheese. I didn't have any in the fridge, so I grabbed some that I had freeze dried. If I would have had fresh, I would have used fresh. Didn't have any, so I went to my pantry and I used this instead. So I just added like 3/4 of a cup of freeze-dried cottage cheese to this bowl and added water just to reconstitute it. And but like I said, I would have used fresh cottage cheese or ricotta if I had it, but I didn't, so I'm using what I have in the pantry. I decided to add some parsley to the cottage cheese. I just really like the texture and the flavor and the visual effect of having parsley in there. And then I also added some pepper. You know how I love pepper. So I just gave it a good stir, and it was just like regular cottage cheese. You would honestly never ever know that was freeze dried if you were to eat it. It was really good. So the way it reconstituted together, it worked really, really well. So next, I just sprinkled on some of the cooked ground beef. This is unseasoned ground beef. It's just been fried up. And I reserved some of it when I had cooked dinner last night. I had a 2-pound package of hamburger. I used 1 pound last night in dinner that I didn't record just because it was super busy. And I didn't get a chance to do that, but I did reserve half of it, and I only used half of it today. So this was interesting how far you can stretch some hamburger. Next, I just took those freeze-dried zucchini strips that I had made, and I just made another layer on top of the hamburger and sauce mixture this hamburger and sauce layer that I had just put down. And it's really easy. It's kind of like cooking with styrofoam. I'm not gonna lie, it's really weird. But I mean, I usually make this dish with like a vegan version of it, and when it's just me by myself, and I really enjoy it because it or either vegan or like just a vegetarian version where I don't add any meat, and I'm used to using these noodles, and I'm used to having lots of layers of zucchini to make it like just really an interesting texture and such. So I'm used to cooking with this stuff, but to someone who's just starting out with freeze-dried ingredients, it is super weird. But I mean, I'm just using this because I want to use it up. So this is what this is about. I think I would probably use dehydrated to do this as well. Like dehydrated zucchini noodles, I would use them just the same way, I think. So then I just took the cottage cheese, or this would be like the version of ricotta. You could totally use like make like a cashew cheese here, or like a vegan version if you wanted to. Or one of my favorite things to do if I'm making this vegetarian is I would add like a layer of mushrooms and whatever other type of vegetables in this layer here. But this worked. If you have ricotta, use ricotta. If you have Parmesan, use Parmesan. If you have cottage cheese, use cottage cheese. There's really no right or wrong way. Just try it, add it, be creative, do it. I dare you, kind of thing. And you might be surprised with the results. So I added another layer of the noodles. I think these actually may have been rice noodles. I'm not 100% sure. There was a mix and match of different things in the cupboards. So this is like a mashup of all the things. But then I just took some more of the sauce and just spooned it on over. And remember, this is pizza sauce. It's not even spaghetti sauce, but it still works the same. I think the flavors are, just slightly different, but it still was good. It still worked. And I wasn't like overly generous with that because I wanted to reserve that pint, some of that pint jar for the pizza that we were cooking the crust in the oven. And so yeah, then I sprinkled more hamburger on top. And yes, it looks a little greasy on some of the pieces because I didn't drain it as well as I thought I did. But it doesn't really matter at this point because it's too late, right? It's too late. So yeah. Then I added in the rest of that jar of zucchini noodles that I had preserved. And I just kind of tried to fit them all in a layer. The one thing I wish I would have done is I wish I would have made these zucchini noodles thicker. That's the only thing because they're so thin. They're like, they turn into paper when you cook them. So unless you put or I could have doubled up the layers to make it a little bit more like a noodly texture, but it does have a noodle texture. They really do when you cook them. So it's kind of like a thinner noodle than a thicker noodle, like a lasagna with the texture, the way that they've been preserved. So I actually really like them a little thicker, and I actually had used all of my zucchini noodles up that were a little bit thicker because I liked it. So, and I like the texture of them. But in next season or this coming season, I'm definitely going to make more zucchini noodles, lasagna noodles, much thicker, probably double the thickness of these ones that I use today, so that I could make more hearty lasagna dishes that have that real lasagna texture as well. So then this was the top, and I just finished it off with some mozzarella cheese. This was actually pizza mozzarella cheese that was in the freezer from the bulk order that I had ordered last fall. I think this was the second last bag I have left to use up. So yeah, I used about half of a cup on top. And then I just put it in the oven and baked it up. So I pulled out the pizza crust, the cauliflower pizza crust out of the oven, and I decided it was good enough to start topping it. And so then I just added the rest of what was left of the pint of pizza sauce, which was quite a bit actually, but it was a much thinner sauce than what I would typically like to use for pizza sauce, so that it worked okay. I didn't want to go all the way over the edge because I didn't want it to burn on the pan, but next I added some pizza mozzarella cheese to the top of this, and then I added some ham. I just kind of ripped pieces of the ham that we had in the fridge into little chunks and just placed it all over the top. Now, I didn't add any pineapple for those haters out there. Let me tell me in the comments, does pineapple belong on pizza? Even cauliflower crust pizza. Do you think that pineapple belongs on pizza? And I'm opening myself up to a whole other battle, I know. But I didn't put pineapple, but I did put some pickled peppers on top because I really like them. And they're actually one of my favorite pizza toppings. So that's what I did. I realized I hardly made a dent in any of the other ingredients that I had in the fridge, so we'll put those to the side to use in another day. So this is what the pizza looked like after I pulled it out of the oven. And I do think that I should have baked the crust a little bit longer before I jumped the gun and put the toppings on it, because the crust was just a little bit more it wasn't soggy, it was cooked through. I just like it a little bit more crispy, and but that was the only thing that I didn't like. I just needed to cook it a little bit longer before I topped it. So the crust itself, it held together really nicely. and the texture was pretty good. The flavor was excellent. I really enjoyed this pizza. However, I do not like cauliflower crust pizza when it's cold. I cannot stand it. There's just something about the texture and the flavor that I don't like. So I will only eat this when it's warm, but it made a really nice crust. It was perfect with the cheese. So the lasagna was done, and it was time to pull it out and check it to see how that turned out. It smelled amazing, it looked amazing, and it tasted amazing. It was a really good turnout. I really enjoy this recipe. I love making lasagna or any casserole dishes with dried zucchini noodles. It's one of my favorite things, but it held beautifully. It really didn't take that long to bake, and it wasn't like really runny. It reconstituted just perfectly. It was so good. Really nice dish. As you can see, it looks all pretty. Of course, I should have made it thicker, but it's just Tyson and I tonight, and this is plenty for us. As you can see, it does have a very nice texture. The cheese is very cheesy on top, but the noodles, they baked up really nicely. And it's hard to see the zucchini noodles in there, but they reconstituted perfectly. They had a really nice texture, and they tasted like the sauce and the meat and the cheese. They absorbed the flavor of the dish instead of tasting like zucchini. So, which zucchini doesn't really taste like much, but yeah, they even tasted a little bit like the pasta, because the pasta essentially cooked in the sauce of the dish, and so they just absorb the flavor of the entire dish, and it makes it a really nice treat. So that's how I made dinner tonight. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it inspires you to try something new, to preserve new things. If you haven't made zucchini noodles before, maybe this is some inspiration. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.